Welcome back to day 2 of our 8th annual Inclusion Collaborative State Conference. My name is Kathy Wahl, and I'm the director of the Inclusion Collaborative. I am delighted you are joining us. We hope your first day was full of new learning and helped you reflect on your current work. We also hope it re-energized and motivated you to continue on. Just a few housekeeping items I would like to review. Please review Schedge, your event website. It has everything you'll need for this conference. We will be recording the majority of our sessions this year. Please check back on our website for more information. To access both CEUs and certificates of attendance, please refer to the resources section on Schedge. Please note that these will not be available until the conclusion of the conference. We will have online evaluations provided to you via Schedge. Please be sure to provide feedback for us. We will be sending our virtual swag link to everyone who has completed the conference evaluation. Again, we want to thank our many sponsors this year. First Five Santa Clara County, Strong Start of Santa Clara County, Western Educational Equity Assistance Center, Silicon Valley Community Foundation, Brooks Publishing, Lakeshore Learning, Changing Perspectives, and the Discovery Source. A huge thank you to our sponsors. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce today's keynote speakers, Dr. Julie Causton and Dr. Kristie Pretti-Frontczak. Sponsored by Brooks Publishing, their presentation is entitled The Circle Makers, the what, why, and how of inclusion. These two professionals are leaders in inclusive education and both have amazing backgrounds in promoting inclusion for all. Please open your mind and heart to new possibilities as we create inclusive schools together. We are so honored to welcome both Dr. Causton and Dr. Pretti-Frontczak. Welcome, and please enjoy day 2 of our 2021 Inclusion Collaborative State Conference.
Hi, everyone. We are so excited to be with you today. This is going to be so fun. Welcome, Circle Makers. We're so glad you're here with us, and we're going to be learning together for about an hour. So, Kristie, tell them how to get ready for today.
So Julie and I are big proponents of being comfy and making sure that you're all set. So if you need to, get something to drink, if you're a little bit cold or a little bit hot, we'd love it if you take notes and capture your learning in some way, whether it's screenshots or doodling or an outline. So make sure that you have paper or a Google Drive document. Make sure you have pens and markers and pencils. But above all, make sure that you're comfy. And we love to also invite you to use the comments section from where you're viewing this recording. So the time will be a little bit delayed. We may not always see what you're posting. However, those in this community of listeners and learners will see it. So Julie, what might they try out right away in the comments area?
So right now in the comment area, put something you're feeling really grateful for and or share how you plan to take notes. So I don't know if you can see my screen, but this is my note-taking setup over here, right? So I am set up with all kinds of markers. How about you, Kristie?
I'm ready.
She's got her Uniball pen. She's ready. And this is a reminder that all learners are really diverse. And all learners need different things. And the more we offer choices, the better off our inclusive schools will be.
So there's your first tip. Choice is the friend of inclusion. There you go. You got it. Capture that. You're good to go.
Great. So you're still invited, and you can keep chatting as you go. Chat what you're feeling grateful for, or chat something that you're using to take notes today. So one thing you're using to take notes today. And that will be really helpful for all of us to share. Okay, good. Some people are putting my children, health and family, beautiful. Keep them coming. We're going to introduce ourselves to you in case you don't know who we are. So my name is Julie Causton, and when my son was a second grader, he introduced me to his teacher, and he said, my mom is a doctor, but she's not the kind that helps people. So You'll find that to be true also. What we've put is a little collage of different images about our lives. And here in the center, these are my children, Ella and Sam. Ella is a senior. Sam is a freshman at Brown University this year. And they're really the inspiration behind all the work that I do. Over on the left-hand side, you'll see a picture of my wife, Ellen. We got married 2 years ago. And that's a picture of us at our wedding. I also wanted you to see how cute we look all cleaned up. And I've written many books. All the books that I've written are about inclusive education. And so they're all about, from different stakeholders' perspectives, the educator's handbook, the paraprofessional's handbook, the principal's handbook, the occupational therapist's handbook, 30 Days to the Co-Taught Classroom. All of those are all about inclusive education, because I spend my time, energy, my passion, my love, every waking moment is about how do we create more inclusive schools in and around the world. There's also a book there called The Too Much Unicorn, which is part of my identity. I'm someone who has ADHD as an attribute. And so it's a book about what it's like to be too much in every single environment that I'm in. And it's a really fun read. So that's a little bit about me. Kristie, you want to share a little bit about you?
Great. And we're grateful for all the folks that have joined us live and or watching it on demand. Folks are continuing to share what they're grateful for. So that always gets us excited, and we're glad to be here. So I'm Kristie Pretti-Frontczak, very similar to things around Julie in terms of a passion for creating what we'll talk about today, which is wider and wider circles. My experience and my background has really been young children, and then the teachers and educators who serve them. So kind of bookends, if you will. The pictures in the top left are some of the children that I worked with as an early interventionist and early childhood special educator in Oregon and in Idaho. So out there in the western part of the world, Julie's in New York today, and I'm in Ohio. So we know that many of you are there in California. And the bottom picture is my family. Julie didn't have all her pets on her slide, but she's got several cats and dogs, and I have one. And I don't have any children other than the one and my husband, but that's not really nice to say, huh? And what else? The kind of the thread that brings Julie and I together, not only the inclusion, but is our work around behaviors that challenge us. So you may see a heart on her slide and mine. We have a new article out on leading with love that is a resource we're sharing with you today. And then, like Julie, I've published many different resources on how to do inclusive practices, authentic assessment, embedded instruction, tiered instruction, all those fun things. And all of that to say, Julie and I believe that we were destined to be co-teachers. So we're going to show you why we know that it was in the stars.
Okay, get ready, everybody. You're not expecting this. Here it is. These are our high school pictures, and we would love your comments. We welcome them. You can comment about hairspray, comment about the 90s and how good our hair looked. Do you have any comments at all? But yeah, we were destined to co-teach because even though we didn't know each other, we still had that dreamy look in our eyes, dreaming about a time when we could co-teach together about inclusion. Okay, here's our flow for today. Flow meaning this is how we're going to spend our time. We welcomed you and we're getting settled now. We're going to talk about what is inclusive education. We have a brand new definition that we're going to unveil to you. We're going to talk about why it matters. And then we're going to talk about how we really do it. And then we're going to close it up. So we have a quick session with you all today. Here we go. Let's get grounded. What is inclusive education? Rachel Gilbert says twins about our pictures. Yes.
Yeah.
To get us really, really settled and set, we're going to show you a brand new video that we put out on PBS called The Circle Makers, and it will help you understand what we're talking about during this, our time together. So I'll stop
this
sharing.
is a short video. The team here that's putting on the conference will give you a link to a webpage essentially that Julie and I put together with all of our resources that we'll be mentioning, including a link to this video and the rest in the series. So it's an animated video. It's pretty short, 5-6 minutes. It really sets the tone for what our mindset is, what our heart set is, and what we hope to build as far as a skill set throughout the world around inclusive education. And so just know that if you love this video, you have a link to it on your website and you can share it widely without permission. So Julie, here, I'm going to make this bigger and we'll get playing it.
Hi everyone, I'm Julie Causton, and I'm here to talk about what is inclusion with a story that I've written called The Circle Makers. Long ago in schools, we tried to draw lines to make distinctions between students. These lines were drawn in thick, dark ink between people. These lines were drawn to mark the differences between them. These lines were supposed to be helpful. They were supposed to help teachers distinguish between those who could go fast and those who needed to go slow. These lines were meant to help teachers teach the right stuff in the right way. These lines made some people feel comfortable and safe. One problem was there were so many lines that we had to put labels on our lines to keep them straight. General education, special education, learning disabilities, emotional disabilities, gifted and talented English language learners, intellectual disabilities, special education rooms, special education hallways, special education schools. Another problem was when we drew these lines, someone was always on one side and someone was always on the other. Someone was always left out. Someone was always given less. Someone was always wanting to be seen or heard or part of. Another problem was that people assumed that students on one side of the line were typical learners, and that typical was real and that average was true, and that anyone who wasn't average had to go somewhere else to learn something else. The problem was people saw disability as something that needed to be fixed, and it needed to be fixed over there in a different room in a separate space. Eventually, these lines created separate boxes or classrooms, a separate system with separate teachers, classes for students who were thought to need separate things. People even started to think that separate lines and boxes were good. Another problem was every person on both sides of any line had different needs. Every person needed to go fast sometimes and slow at other times. Every person was more curious about certain things and bored by other things. Every person had things they were good at and other things they were not good at. So often the lines were blurry. Sometimes people couldn't agree on where to place the lines. Sometimes even the line makers argued about where to place the lines. These lines and these boxes weren't real, but people thought they were. At the same time, we knew that separate was never equal. We knew that humans needed to be together and belong in order to learn and grow. We knew that separation from other people was likely to affect everyone's hearts and minds. So in education, we decided we had to do something. We had to bend some lines and move some lines and erase others. We had to take all the lines and stick them together end to end. It took a lot of time and a lot of work. This now made a brand new long line that we kept bending and bending and bending. The new line connects end to end. This new line is called inclusive education. This new line is a circle. This new circle was very difficult for the original line makers. You see, when they went to school, straight lines existed. Straight lines were important. They grew up thinking some children belong on certain sides of certain lines. And change is hard, especially for line makers. This new circle is called inclusive education, and it means we value everyone. We use this new line to connect, not to separate. Inclusive education means we are curious about how we are alike and how we are different. We challenge and support everyone. We teach to students' individual strengths. We give students choices. We celebrate what is unique about each person, because we learn best with and from those who are different than us. What happened to the line makers? Turns out line makers are the most excellent circle makers. As soon as they saw that these circles created new opportunities for their students and new connections and a sense of belonging, These circles helped students to do better, to learn more, and to make friends. It turns out that students who used to be on one side of the line were excellent teachers of students who used to be on the other side of the line. And the exact opposite was also true. It turns out that it wasn't just good for students on one side of the line, it ended up to be better for all students on every side of any line. But the story does not end with just drawing the circles. Like a circle, this story has no end. It's simply the beginning. Being together inside the circle is the very first step. It's what happens inside the circles where the true magic can be found. To all of you circle makers, let's continue to create wider and wider circles together.
Oh, I just love that invitation there at the end, Julie. You know, we've seen the video a lot of times, but I love it. It's like, how can we, wherever we are in this world, wherever we are in our journey, how can we create wider and wider circles?
Yeah, it's really an invitation. And I want to invite people to do a couple things. An invitation to just share your comments, your thoughts, your reactions in the chat. Also an invitation to think about, where can we be wider and wider circle makers? Where are there places where we're still drawing lines? And I hope you heard that Kristie and I feel really strongly about this. A lot of you are circle makers to begin with, because you're here. And a lot of us really struggle with the line makers. How do we teach and support them to become circle makers? And so one of the things we just want to share is this video might be useful for you to take and use right away as a tool. If you're just like, I just need more tools to help my line makers become circle makers, we think this is a really good start. So Kristie, even though we haven't really gotten started, you said, we've already got a tip called Choice is the Friend of Inclusion. We've already got a video that's like, you can take it and use it and share it with anyone. Do you want to talk about how they can get to the dashboard or not?
I think I'll have to let the team do that, because I'm not exactly sure. Myra, you can jump in too. We're going to give you a link. I can tell you that much. We can give you a link. I can show and share the dashboard, Julie.
Okay, so Myra can put the link in their chat right now, and just know that Kristie is going to show you what this looks like. And we just want you to know this is kind of like one of those Oprah moments, like you get a dashboard and you get a dashboard, everybody gets a dashboard. So what's a dashboard? It's a place where we'll put all this stuff for you, and anything that we discuss or talk about will have a link to, so you can actually print it, use it, copy it, share it, etc.
Because sometimes we find that people want more and more tips, more and more how. And sometimes it's stripping it down and going, what are the most effective things I can do? Here in a minute, we'll even be talking more about why inclusion. Well, maybe you've said it year after year, day after day. And maybe showing the video is a new way in, a new way to say what you've always said. So for me, having kind of key resources at my fingertips that, you know, someone like Julie and myself have used all over the world to find, this is really what gets folks to change. So this is our little gift to you. Like Julie said of Oprah, you just click on the box and there'll be different things. The handout for the definition, which we're going to talk about next. We're going to talk about choices, how to adapt and modify. I already alluded to our article on leading with love. We've given you some videos that you can use and reuse around behaviors that are challenging for kids who are really far off grade level. Julie and I hear this all the time, that this is the reason that we can't do inclusion, is because kids are so far off grade level. And even, you know, we love co-teaching, and we're destined how to use paraprofessionals as co-teachers. So there's a lot more on the dashboard. And today in our live time, we just want to spark some ideas and then come back here to get more. Julie, what else would you add?
No,
I guess the videos.
Oh, that's right. The videos are down here. So they're at the very bottom. You've seen the circle maker so far. There are 2 others. If we have time, we'll show because of Oliver today too. So you'll get to see a second one. And Isabella says, yes, I can see how I can use this video to create interest for more inclusive practices. We know that many of you are here because this is your heart's work, and you just want more tools to do this really well. So in our time together, we're just going to get your toolbox ready, because here we come, right? There's going to be a lot of tools for you. So we've shared with you choice is the friend of inclusion. We've shared with you the video, and now we're going to share with you our definition of inclusive education. As you listen to this definition, all we want you to do is jot in the chat which of these words speaks to you. Which of these phrases are important to you? And you'll just put them in the chat. So I'll read the first part, Kristie. Inclusive education means we no longer accept that separate classrooms, separate schools, and separate lives are in the best interest of any student. Separating people by ability disadvantages everyone. Belonging is a human need. Our educational system, practices, and spaces need to be reimagined.
Inclusive education means every student is valued because of their strengths, gifts, and even challenges, as disability is simply diversity. Everyone benefits from meaningful participation and opportunities to learn grade level content with diverse peers. We must trust that all students come to us as incredible whole people who do not need to be fixed.
Okay, so this is what we call the mindset or the heart set, the belief system that needs to be in place before a school system can be really wildly inclusive. Kristie, today, as people are sharing in the chat, which we love, today, what strikes you about this definition?
For me, Julie, it's the last sentence because it's what I also noticed when I watched the video, that our history, because, you know, I'm a special educator by training, by practice, by profession, it's in, you know, it's just everything I've been since I was probably 18 years old. And when I was watching the video today, it said, you know, we've even begun to think that these separate spaces are good. And I know that many times I've walked into a classroom and thought, ooh, this is not good. Let's see, is there a different space we could go to? And I want to like run and hide. And I think there's this underlying mentality still somewhere in me, Julie, that early intervention in particular is there to fix people, fix families, or fix the problem, or fix the disability or delay. So that's really something I have to keep revisiting, is my commitment to seeing families and children as whole. And of course, needing support and needing us to remove barriers, but not to fix them. So that's a long one, but that's what I've been thinking about today.
I love it.
What
So
you?
Kristie picked out this bottom sentence. We must trust that all students come to us as incredible whole people who do not need to be fixed. I love that. And I'm going to today go up a little bit and share this one. Disability is simply diversity.
Mm-hmm.
I love, love, love when we think about that concept or construct of disability is simply diversity. And when we put it that way, it's not as if when a human has a disability, we've got to fix it, got to remediate it, we got to catch them up. It's really, we've got to embrace that human and support them in new ways, maybe, and give them access. And so for me, disability, simply diversity is what's striking me today. Ooh, and Melanie picked out our educational system, practices, and spaces need to be reimagined.
Yeah.
So Kristie and I have been reimagining schools around the world for the past 25 plus years together. And what I want you to know is that it's not just a heart set and mindset, it's also a skill set.
Yeah.
And it means we can have all these ideas and ideals, which are necessary, important. And we also have to have all these pieces in place. So we're going to be quiet for a full minute and let your eyes read. And then Kristie and I are going to pull out one or two to talk about today. And we'd love in the chat if you shared what feels really important from this list. Feel free as you read to put your ideas in the chat, which ones really are important to you. You can even number them too in your head, so you can just number them down. Okay, Kristie, I want to share 2 that are important to me today.
Phew,
I'm going to
all
share.
right, you
Yeah.
can.
All right.
Okay,
Okay,
go.
thanks. Create welcoming spaces
You
where
always
students.
pick that one.
I love it because we have to think about everyone's multiple identities. And I happen to know that you had Shelley Moore yesterday, and Shelley Moore certainly talked about all the identities that people bring to school. And so we have to see those identities. We have to celebrate those identities. Okay. And disability is simply an identity. And then I'm going to pop to the bottom one because this one makes a lot of people, their eyebrows kind of raise when they look at this one.
Yeah.
Utilize challenging behaviors. People are like, don't you get it? We want to get rid of challenging behavior. Yes. But if you see any challenging behavior as an opportunity to create warm and safe relationships, to reduce stressors and soothe systems and nurture students' well-being. So sorry to take 2 right from the top, but Kristie,
No, it's
what do you want
okay.
to?
Robin and Sasha both also resonated with what you said. And I'm going to
Okay.
do 2 quickly then, because Ruby and I both saw partnering with families. I just feel like that one can't be said often enough. And I love the word dream in it. So I'm going to say that. And then the
Okay.
other one I was thinking about today, Julie, was the Just Right supports, that second to last one, provide additional supports continuously and seamlessly. I think sometimes when we think, I believe in inclusion except for, or is inclusion fair when this kid is so disruptive to everyone else? Or, well, we love inclusion, but I don't know that it's just right for this kid. I love how you always invite us to think about, we just haven't figured out the right combination of supports yet. That's all it is. It's not whether or not inclusion should be, could be, what might be, maybe next year. It is done. Now, our job is to figure out the supports, and those are going to change, maybe from Monday to Friday, certainly from year to year, maybe content to content. So that's my big one today, is that it's not whether or not we should do inclusion. And when it doesn't seem to be working, it's really that we haven't found the right combination of supports.
I love that. And people are resonating with that too, Kristie, just in the idea that we have to redesign our systems and structures. It kind of brings it to full circle. We can no longer have a bunch of resource rooms and segregated classrooms and say, but we also do inclusion. It means you don't do inclusion. You're not inclusive if you segregate kids, okay? And we love to think about that big definition. Now, if you're just thinking to yourself, I loved those words and I wish I had them, you're going to have them on the dashboard. We've got a definition of inclusion. It's a 1-page that you can take and print. It's just right there for you. I just want you to know, if you're trying to write anything down, we've got it for you. And we want you to know that when we think about widening circles, we're thinking about human diversity in general, not just about ability.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're talking about the diverse humans that we work with, not just the diverse humans that are here, but all the students that we work with, we really look at this whole concept of the identity wheel. And I don't know if Shelley did or didn't do some work in identity wheel work with you yesterday, but this is the wheel we use. And Kristie, do you want to explain it quickly?
Yeah, so you can Google identity wheel, and there's lots of different ways to think of it. So I'm going to tell you why there's 2 layers, and then where power and privilege come into play, just as a big context for the work. The inner circle that looks like what Julie and I will say, and Shelley and others do as well, a Trivial Pursuit game, is that colorful wheel. These are these internal dimensions that you'll see there in the light purple is ability, and it's race, and it's age, and it's gender, and it's okay. And where people put them on the inner or in the outer varies. This is just one version. We also have and others. Then there's sort of these external identities from the sports teams that we like, to the religious spaces that we go to the degrees that we have, to, I would even say, Julie, our theories on reading instruction is part of, makes up our identity. If we're back in the day of whole language, versus phonics, or if we're really thinking about what approach works best for kids who type to communicate, those are parts of our identities. And then you layer that with power and privilege. And then I'll let Julie kind of bring back how this will be used in our rest of our time together and then our strategies. But the power and privilege is noticing and understanding and naming as a first place which identities have power and privilege. And then working from there, understanding that many of our systems, our educational system as a whole, is grounded in the white dominant culture. Therefore, those folks who have different identities, either internal and or external, are going to be marginalized and or harmed in some way. And so that's the work that needs to be done when we reimagine education. That's the work that needs to be done when we think about the structures. It can't just be about inclusion for kids that have a learning disability. It also has to be inclusion by race, by gender, by spirituality, by physical and mental health. And so we want folks to really start to see that wholeness of ourselves, of our colleagues, of our families, and certainly of the children that we're supporting. And so situating, Julie and I are like one little slice of this pie when we talk about supporting students with individualized education plans, recognizing that they come as a whole will, not just whether they're on an IEP or not. So for me, Julie, that's just sort of keeping this, maybe it's moving all the time, and understanding where I have power and privilege is my responsibility within that decision making.
Yeah, and I would say understanding where you have power and privilege and understanding where our actual practices, policies need shoring up.
Okay.
And so we spend a lot of time and energy thinking about inclusive education when it comes to ability and a lot of other identities. And so, but we've got to focus on the why of it first. Now, some of you who are trying to be change makers, circle makers in your school systems have realized that you have to return to the why over and over and over and over again. You cannot return to the why enough, because once a group of humans understands why we're headed in a direction, the creative circle makers that live in your school systems can do this work. But if they're wondering, no, is it really right for this kid still? It means they need more support on the why to get them to those places. So when Kristie and I talk about the why of inclusive education and why we widen circles, it sometimes is about the law. It's sometimes about personal stories. So when we say the law, we have whole classes that we could teach on this, but it's really where it's situated in IDEA, where it's situated in least restrictive environment, and where it's situated with supplemental aid supports and services. Those three things really draw us to this place where we say inclusive education is preferred in the law for students with and without disabilities to be educated together. So our job is to figure out the how of it. Sometimes it's the research. Kristie, you sum up the research really well.
Sometimes I'm snarky. I'll say, but Julie, is inclusion beneficial for reading outcomes?
Yes.
Math?
Yes.
Social studies?
Yes.
Band?
Yes.
French?
Yep.
Welding?
Yes.
I made that one up. What about 3-year-olds?
Yes.
13-year-olds?
Yep.
What about behavior?
Yes.
What about kids who are dyslexic?
Still, yes.
What about, you see, and I could play this game all day with her, and she would say, Kristie, there's so much research that you cannot pick, even welding, you cannot pick a topic and age and ability and identity. I should have said, how about for students who are mixed race? How about for students who are blind? How about for students who are transgender? How about for students who are, right, any and all? And that's what's really clear about the research, both qualitative quantitative, single subject, any design, good research and not so good research, it all comes up with the same conclusion that everyone, kids with, without the labels we assign, benefit when we have an inclusive educational system.
Yes. So Kristie and I were both professors at universities, and we could no longer study, does inclusion work? Because if we continue to study, a lot of people wonder, why did that research die down in the 90s? Why did it die down? Here's why: because we could not get tenured, we could not get promoted or tenured if we continue to study, does it work? Same reason we're not studying any longer. Is the earth round? We've got that, we're pretty clear. And so no one's going, but really, is it? Let's triple check. So that's why. And the other thing is, just know that inclusive education is best for all kids in all ways, all the time. Also, segregation is harmful for all kids in all ways, all the time. And so those two things put together really help us understand the why of it.
You know, Julie, you just said something really important, because I think oftentimes people confuse inclusive education with the general ed curriculum, or what they imagine a 8th grade biology or a pre-K classroom looks like. And while they are oftentimes the same thing, it can be hard, because people are like, but I've seen that classroom and it's not meeting that student's need. And so you have to go a little bit deeper beyond the labels of the environment, or the labels of the curriculum, or the labels of the lesson. For me, just as you said that everyone benefits from being included. You didn't say every inclusive classroom is effective. We still have work to do around effective co-teaching, differentiation, universal design for learning, creating access points. Don't get us wrong. There's work to be done. However, what Julie's saying is that inclusive education benefits everyone. So I don't mean to split hairs, Julie, but that just sounded different in my head right then.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Even the research that's done in mediocre classrooms with untrained teachers, we're still seeing the benefit.
Right.
The benefit is always there, no matter how good the program is, the inclusive program. So that being said, in most school systems, we're helping to create highly effective inclusive classrooms. And these are just reasons that people do this work. And don't forget, you have to return to what is inclusion and why inclusion over and over and over and over again. And those humans in your school systems are diverse also. Some will just look at the research and go, oh, I get it, let's do it. Some will look at the law and go, oh, we're expected to, got it. Some will listen to personal stories and go, it's right, I'm doing it. Some will just say, this is social justice, right? This makes sense, right? Some will just hear stakeholder pressure, parents saying this is what we want, and we'll do it. But the point is, circle makers, all of you, we have to have all of these whys at the center of our work in order to be effective in creating inclusive schools.
And Julie, maybe the way that we leave this tip is that a colleague of ours just made it a half an hour ago. We were meeting with an amazing administrator, and she said, my favorite word, recommitment, that we lost some ground on our work around inclusive education during the first phases of the pandemic. And we are today making a recommitment to inclusive education. So for me, that hopefully this conference is, really affirming and really getting your recommitment to say, all right, I got to say it again. I know I'm the broken record in the district, but I'm recommitting to talking about why and what, and then making sure that we have the how.
And if you just want to print out that definition of inclusive education and roll it up and tie a bow around it, it's a really nice gift to give out to people for holiday season. I just wanted to let you know that that's really good. Kristie and I are going to do a little bit of how, and the how stuff that we're going to do today are things that you can take and use in your school experience. And the first is, in order to do this well, we have to take off old lenses and try on new lenses. Okay, so what we too often find is that we're thinking with outdated lenses on. We've got old lenses on and we're not seeing clearly. We have to try on new lenses in order to do this work. So we're going to ask you to join with us and put as many of these right in the chat. First question, I'd like everyone to look at these. Are these descriptors of these Winnie the Pooh characters positive, negative, or neutral? We'd like everyone to answer. That's your invitation. So you can look to see, are these descriptors positive, negative, or neutral?
And that's really the lens at which you see the character. Do you see the character through a lens of fairly positive, or is it kind of a neutral lens, or does it seem like a negative lens?
So these descriptors that we're asking you to define as positive, negative, neutral are happy, pleasure seeker, relaxed for Winnie the Pooh. Eeyore is loyal, lovable, obstacle finder. Piglet is sensitive, empathetic, and kind. Tigger is energetic, quick, and fun. Owl is wise, gives advice, is a philosopher. And Rabbit is organized, detailed, rule follower. So Kristie, would you say these are positive, negative, or neutral?
I think generally that they are positive to neutral, meaning that, and the reason I say that, y'all, is because I wouldn't mind any of these labels. Now, you could find somebody that finds that they don't like that particular label, and then it becomes something different. But generally speaking, even the obstacle finder is taking something that might have been seen as a neurosis or a obsession or something maybe a more negative term, and now we see it as something that we all benefit from. So that's how I see my lens, Julie. When I look at these, I wouldn't mind being called them. I see that they benefit myself and the whole, and that's how I decide.
Okay, good. Good. I agree. Positive to neutral for sure. You wouldn't mind being called these things. And that's what a lot of people are saying in the chat. Positive, positive, positive,
Yeah.
positive.
If
positive.
somebody wrote
Agree.
a report about me and said that I was happy and empathetic and a philosopher, I'd be like, oh, thank you.
Yeah, right. Okay, good. So these descriptors about these characters are using a lens. And unfortunately, in school settings, we often use a different lens to look at our characters in schools. We use a deficit-based lens, we use the medical model lens, and sometimes it looks just like, oh, before I do that, Kristie,
yeah,
which one of these do you see yourself? I'd like everybody, so everybody's invited to identify themselves with one of the Winnie the Pooh characters. So today, who are you most like? What do you think, Kristie?
Well, I'm always Rabbit, but I aspire to be Pooh.
Oh, okay. Always Rabbit, aspire to be Pooh. Today, I am Tigger. Just Tigger. Today, I'm just Tigger.
I'm like, just today?
All the days, I'm Tigger. Go ahead and share in the chat. Which of these Pooh characters do you most identify with?
And so as you're doing that, we're doing this Pooh story as a big how we are more inclusive, as Julie said, is by changing the lens at which we look at our students, write about, talk about, think about. And so we're going to, in these last few minutes, we're going to get you all the way there, but just know that this is sometimes taking this really complicated thing. Like I have to learn how to differentiate. I learn how to do this curriculum. Really, we just need to change our lens and so much more becomes possible. So that's our big how today.
Okay. People are sharing Pooh, Rabbit. I'm a mix of Tigger and Eeyore. Lots of rabbits, lots of Tiggers. Okay, good. And so I'm going to change the lens.
Okay.
And unfortunately, in school settings, we often see our students through a negative lens. So we've got Pooh, who's gluttonous and dull. Eeyore, who's pessimist and energy drain. Piglet, who's nervous and neurotic. Tigger, who's hyper overactive and loud. Owl, who's self-centered, egotistical, and Rabbit, who's bossy and inflexible. I dare say our special education system is set up to look for deficits in humans and to keep track of those deficits and to take data on those deficits and figure out just how many standard deviations below the norm are they in this particular subset. Now, everybody put yes or no in the chat if you have a deficit area. So everybody put yes or no in the chat if you have a deficit area. So I'm wondering, we'll learn soon if this group has any deficits or if they don't. I'm curious.
Well, I think what's also interesting, not only would most of us now say, oh, I would not want to be called these things. I don't see how those things benefit the person or the community. Then also on top of it, because this is the paradox of who we are, as I look at Rabbit, I still say that is me. And then I go, but I don't want to be Pooh anymore. So it's interesting how even some of them I'll still take on and accept. And then others I'm like, oh, now I don't want that one. So individuals see things through different lenses. Is it okay to be nervous and neurotic? When is it good to have somebody that's overactive, or is it never? So we have all these things going on in our minds. And evidently we have a bunch of conference goers that have a lot of deficits, Julie.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I didn't expect in California, but it's true. A lot of us come here to this work. All of us come to this work with a whole lot of deficits because we're human beings. But in special education, we hyper focus on humans' deficits and we work to fix or remediate those deficits. And there is a very different way, and it is to change our lens. From a deficit model, I'm going to go backwards to show you to this, to a positive model of looking at our humans in front of us. And I'm going to take it one step further because this is what we've done in our school systems. We have medicalized difference. We have said, you are so different that it is a medical concern. Things like disordered thinking. A lot of the language in our definitions around every single disability is steeped in the medical community to say, you are so divergent from everyone else that you're disordered, deficient. And we think there's no room any longer for that language, that thinking, and that talking about even our students who have very significant support needs. We think there's no room.
Yeah, go ahead, Julie.
Go ahead, Chris. No, go for it.
I was just saying, go to the next slide. That the invitation is to write about, think about, and talk about, not in a way that now we have rose-colored glasses, that our lens is like, oh, I don't see that you are 3 labels: deaf, blind, autistic. No. We absolutely see those, but we see them as your identity. We even start using identity first language. Notice I just said deaf, blind, autistic. I didn't put person first in that example because it may be that person, it is their identity. And so we really want to change the lens that we see disability through as the work that we need to be doing in our recommitment. So how do we make that transition, Julie?
Yeah, so Kristie has invited us to think about, talk about, and write about students in different ways. If we were to take the IEPs from your school system and we were to highlight all of the language in your present level of educational performances in that first section, it would be interesting to see what kind of language are you using? How are you thinking about these individuals? And we're asking people to move from this old-fashioned, outdated medical lens to an equity lens, okay? In the medical lens, I'm going to talk about the medical lens. Disability resides within the human. The focus is on the pathology or impairment. The aim is to fix or remediate the person. Disability labels are seen as deficits, and there's a focus on the label as the problem, not the system. And in this particular lens, we ignore systemic inequities. In fact, we often don't even believe they exist. That's the medical model, and that lens is time to set that lens down and pick up an equity lens. And Kristie, you want to explain that?
And so you can see the parallel of where we put our focus, what we attend to, and what we deal with. So we see disability as a socially constructed identity that changes over time. Our language changes over time about disability because it's all socially constructed. We focus on the societal barriers that disable people. We aim to provide those just right supports that I mentioned a few minutes ago in terms of why is inclusion not working? We just haven't found the right combination of supports. Disability is a natural difference. It's not an abnormality. It's not something to be that needs to be fixed or remediated. And then, as Julie said, now we focus on the system as the problem, the educational system, the curriculum, the IEP, the law, even the rules around eligibility, not the disability, and that we name and address, take action in allyship wherever we have power and privilege to take care of those systemic inequities. And it's a huge call to action, absolutely. And that's the work that we need to fuss with more than, is this child this label or that label, this many standard deviations or that many, or what are their triggers, or what are they doing 5 times a day with or without support. We could put more of our attention on addressing the systemic inequities versus trying to fix or remediate the human.
So
Okay.
that's all. We've just set down
That's all.
those lenses and pick up the new lenses. So just, that's no problem at all. But a lot of this language is so important for you to share with folks, because it's actually in the way that humans are thinking about the people in front of them that are causing the barriers that we often see to inclusion. We're going to do our last 5 minutes with you is going to be sharing a video with you about offering choices, and you're going to see how it all comes together. So as Kristie is pulling it together, I'm going to share a couple thoughts. You're going to see the last video called Because of Oliver. You have it, so you can use it. But this is an example of how 2 teachers offer choices to make the school a better place because of Oliver.
And Julie, I would say create access points. So this is how we actually do the work to create an inclusive lesson or classroom, far down in the weeds. So here we go.
Hi everyone, I'm Julie Causton, and today I'm answering the question, what does inclusive education look like? In a story called Because of Oliver. Here is Oliver. He loves being at school with his friends. He is very, very busy. He likes to walk while he learns, and sometimes he hums. Sitting is not his favorite activity, and he really enjoys bouncing. He is fascinated by both insects and trains. He used to be in a room for students who had similar characteristics. His particular room was labeled autism. When he was in that labeled room, it made the hard parts even harder. It was harder to talk with students who struggled to talk. It was harder to make friends with others who struggled to make friends. He could not learn from and make friends with other students in other rooms. And worse yet, students could not learn from and make friends with him. But now, Oliver is in a 2nd grade inclusive classroom with 32 students, where lines are not drawn between students. In this classroom, every person is valued for the ways they are different and alike. Oliver's class has 2 teachers, Miss Olaya and Miss Maisel. As you already know, teachers are some of the most creative sort of people. This story is about what happens when these 2 teachers change a lesson, all because of Oliver. This lesson was about parts of a story. The students would learn about character, setting, and plot. The teachers had some plans. They would have the students sit crisscross applesauce on the floor, and Miss Maisel would read a book about a monster under a bed, and Miss Olaya would act out some of the very best parts. Students would raise their hand and answer the questions, and write with a pencil about the plot. They then would each draw the monster from the book. It was going to be a good lesson, but as Oliver's teachers thought about their plan, they realized this lesson might not work for someone who does not like to sit, or can't raise his hand, or answer questions, and does not write with a pencil. Luckily, Oliver's teachers both know about the creative magic of inclusion. They believe when they plan a lesson for their class, they are planning for everyone in their class. So the teachers got together and changed the lesson because of Oliver. They first wrote a list and crossed out what Oliver can't do, and circled what he can do. They took the negative list that came with Oliver, crossed out the negative words, and circled the positive words. From Oliver can't sit to Oliver loves to move. He does not talk to he can point, draw, and smile to communicate. He won't sit still to he works best when standing and bouncing. He does not write to is starting to type on a keyboard. He has trouble starting a task to starts a task with the help of a friend. Focused on trains to is an expert on trains. obsessed by insects to is an insect scholar. Starting with these circles, the teachers have created access points. Access points are just a student's best way of learning. Now these teachers have almost everything they need to plan their inclusive lesson. Next, they had to change the rules of the lesson. From students must sit crisscross applesauce to students can stand or bounce to listen. Students must raise hands to answer questions to students can point to an answer, tell a friend, or draw their answer. From a student must write with a pencil to students can write with a pencil, a crayon, a marker, or even type. From students must draw the monster in the book to students can create their very own monster using their favorite things. From students must do things independently to every student can get help from their friends. Let's watch this new lesson in action. When the monster lesson began, Oliver chose to stand just to the side of the teacher. It turns out some students sat on the floor, one sat on a ball and bounced, and several students stood near the back of the rug. Oliver stood and watched as Miss Maisel read the story and Miss Olaya acted out the very best parts. Next, it was time for questions. The teacher asked who were the characters in the story. Most students turned to a friend and said their answer. 3 students drew their answer, and 1 student pointed to an answer and smiled. 2 students needed a reminder not to roll on the carpet, and 1 student needed a reminder not to interrupt. Next, it was time to write the plot. Petra chose a bright green marker, her favorite color. Oliver and Sam both typed their answers in their very favorite fonts. Chloe used a fresh orange crayon because she loves the smell of new crayons. And Stanley B was the only one who chose to use a pencil, a sharpened No. 2 pencil. When the students learned that they could create their own monster, they cheered with delight. However, Oliver did not like the loud noise of the cheering. He covered his ears and began to cry. Trayvon put his hand on Oliver's back and grabbed his noise-blocking headphones and handed them to him. He told Oliver it would be okay. Oliver slowly uncovered his ears and put on his headphones and stopped crying. Oliver did not start making his monster at first, but Aiden reminded him to get started. It turns out Chloe and Daniel both needed reminders from their friends too. Stanley helped Rosie when her glue stick broke. Oliver helped Ellie. He typed the box when Ellie asked him where the glitter was. Oliver bounced and hummed loudly as he worked. Chloe asked him to hum quieter, and he did. Everyone got to use materials from the art table to create their own monster. Rosie's had a baseball bat, arms, and legs. Douglas's was pink and wore a superhero cape. Ruthie's looked quite a bit like her new puppy. And Oliver's had, you guessed it, 6 insect legs, a real train body, and a set of feathery antennae. The old lesson was good, but this new lesson turned out to be better, much better. Better for Rosie, Trayvon, Petra, both Stanleys, Sam, Daniel, Ami, Chloe, better for everyone. And this new lesson was much better for Oliver. It turns out this lesson, this class, and this school are all so much better because of Oliver.
All right, Julie, we're a little over, so bring us home on that note.
Okay, our last thing for you all is just to say thank you. We hope you saw how access points really, really, really matter in this particular case, especially with Oliver, and that we think that schools are better because of students. The more diverse the students, the better our schools are going to be. So we want to encourage you to go out and make wider and wider circles. For our very last thing, put in the chat, this is an invitation for everyone, one word that comes to mind when you think of our time together. So this is called In a Word. Just one word put in the chat that comes to mind when you think of our time together. And I would love to say thank you, Kristie, for your work here. And thank you all for your circle making work.